What would you do if the only thing standing between you and death was a flashlight, a stolen phone, and the girls who refused to let you carry the bag alone? This is the story of how three people turned an alien hellscape into something worth fighting for, one impossible day at a time. Our protagonist woke up that morning with Suyao's foot pressed against his face. The girl slept like a starfish, arms and legs flung in every direction, completely unbothered by the alien planet trying to kill them outside. He tickled her soul just to watch her flinch, and she yanked her leg back, mumbled something about eating meat, and kept snoring like nothing happened. That small moment of ordinary chaos was enough to remind him why surviving this place was worth the effort. He got up quietly and checked the meat strips they had laid out on the rocks the night before. No raw smell, just raw meat scent and cool cave air doing exactly what he had hoped it would do. The girls were still out cold, which meant he had a window of time, and he was not going to waste it. He grabbed the big flashlight and the shotgun and headed deeper into the cave. The wildfire plan outside was already in motion in his mind, and once that inferno started, this entrance area would become completely uninhabitable from the heat. They needed a backup shelter, a place to ride out the burn, something deeper, safer, further in. He moved down into the dark, following the tunnel as it sloped downward into the mountain. The glowing minerals that lined the upper walls faded out around the 100-meter mark, replaced by total blackness. Then he heard it, squeaking, thousands of tiny sounds pressing in from above. He pointed the flashlight at the ceiling and stopped moving. The entire roof of the tunnel was covered with giant bats, each one the size of a wash basin, pig-faced, long-fanged, packed together in a writhing black mass. He expected them to dive, expected them to attack, expected a fight. What he got instead was silence, then a sound like hail, as every bat the light touched simply died. They fell off the ceiling in clusters, eyes rolled back, bleeding from every opening in their skulls. Light killed them, not stunned them, not scared them, killed them instantly, like flipping a switch. His flashlight was more effective than the shotgun down here, and that realization changed how he moved through the dark entirely. He kept sweeping the beam ahead, and bats dropped like rain for the next 200 meters of tunnel. Then he heard something different cutting through the silence, a sound that did not belong underground at all. Running water. He turned a corner, and the tunnel opened up into something enormous. A river about 10 meters wide cut through the base of the mountain, flowing clear and fast through a cavern with ceilings lost in shadow above. He crouched and touched the surface, warm, not just mild, genuinely warm, like a hot spring drawn up from somewhere deep in the earth. No sulfur smell, no chemical bite, just clean, mineral-rich water flowing endlessly through the dark. He stood up and looked around the cavern, understanding immediately what this meant for their survival. Drinking water, bathing water, temperature control, all of it, unlimited. Right here underground where nothing could threaten them. He ran back up, 10 minutes at a fast walk, and when he emerged into the upper cave, both sisters were awake and absolutely terrified. Suyao was clinging to his leg before he could say a single word, crying, convinced he had been taken or killed. Suli was shaking against his other side, eyes red, arms wrapped around his waist, gripped tight enough to bruise. He let them hold on for a moment, then told them to listen carefully, because what he found downstairs was going to change everything. A hot underground river, unlimited water, their own private bathhouse beneath the mountain. Suyao's tears dried up in roughly 3 seconds. Her eyes went wide and bright, as she tried immediately to sprint toward the tunnel entrance barefoot. He grabbed her by the collar and pulled her back like a kitten, being lifted by the scruff of its neck. Not yet. First, the plan, then the bath. He laid it out step by step, move everything critical, seeds, water, medicine, ammunition, down to the underground river level where it would be safe from the fire. Hang all the meat strips near the cave entrance before the burn, so the heat rolling in would smoke and dry them naturally, turning raw flesh into preserved jerky without any extra effort. After the fire died out, they would have dried meat, a cleared field of vision for kilometers around, and a layer of ash sitting on top of soil that was now the best natural fertilizer this planet could produce. The girls looked at him like he had just solved a puzzle they did not even know existed. They spent the next 2 hours hauling everything. Thousands of pounds of meat strips went up on walls and stalactites near the entrance, hanging like red ribbons from every surface. He wrapped the seed bag in 3 layers of waterproof cloth and packed it at the bottom of his hiking bag, below everything else. Those seeds were worth more than any weapon they carried, more than the shotgun, more than the flashlight. They were the difference between surviving and actually building something. When everything was packed, he shouldered the bag, probably close to 80 pounds, and told the girls to stay close. The moment they passed the 100-meter mark on the way down, the bats had moved back in. Su Yao buried her face in her sister's back and refused to look up. Suli went white as chalk. The ground was soft and wet with the corpses from his earlier pass through the tunnel. He swept the flashlight across the ceiling in long arcs and the bats dropped in waves, clearing the path as they walked. Then, without a word from him, the weight on his back got lighter. He glanced back and saw both sisters walking right behind him, each reaching forward with one hand, gripping the bottom corners of his bag and lifting with everything they had. They were pale, trembling, tears on their faces from fear and the smell of dead bats underfoot. And they were still doing it, still pushing through that fear just to take some of the weight off his shoulders. Something hit him in the chest. Not pain, warmth, the kind you do not know how to respond to without embarrassing everyone. He said nothing, just held the flashlight higher, pushed the beam further into the dark, and told them they were almost there. The underground cavern hit them like stepping into another world entirely, at least for 100 square meters of open space, ceilings stretching up past 10 meters overhead, covered in rock formations that scattered light in every direction when his beam touched them. The river ran through the center, warm mist rising off the surface, thin white fog drifting in the heated air like something out of a painting. Unlike the cold upper cave, this place felt alive, humid and warm and completely sheltered from everything above. He cleared the last few bats with his flashlight, picked a high flat rock platform on the left side of the river for their camp, and they all set their packs down at the same moment. The exhale that came from all three of them was identical. Su Yao immediately announced she was getting in the water. He stopped her before she got both feet off the ground. This was an underground river on an alien planet. Unknown currents, unknown chemistry, unknown things that might live underneath a surface that looked deceptively still. He produced a nylon rope and explained the rules. Safety line around the waist. One person in at a time. 2 on shore holding the rope. No exceptions, no negotiations. He went to the bank first and tested everything himself. Water temperature around 40 degrees. The perfect hot spring warmth. He shined the light straight down, waist deep at most. White sand and rounded pebbles on the bottom, nothing living anywhere in sight. He tossed in a strip of dried meat and waited. Nothing came for it. The water was probably too hot and too mineral heavy for anything to survive. He tasted a drop, slightly salty, dissolved rock salt, likely with trace antibacterial properties. Better than most water sources they could hope to find. He found a natural alcove where some rocks broke the main current into a small calm pool. A few square meters of still, warm water, perfect for bathing. He slipped the rope around Su Yao's waist and told her to stay near the shore. She slid into the water and let out a sound that belonged to someone who had not bathed properly in days and had just discovered that hot water still existed in the universe. He held the rope from shore and kept his eyes on the surface, not the figure moving in the mist. Mostly, when she came out glowing pink like a steamed dumpling, she handed the rope to her sister with a smug little smile. Suli's composure held until he tied the rope around her waist. It felt how tense she was through her thin shirt. She asked him not to look until she was in the water. He turned his back and waited for the splash. When he turned around, she was submerged to her neck, wet hair clinging to her collarbones, lit from below by the faint mineral glow of the river stones, and she looked stunning. He tugged the rope gently, asked if the temperature was comfortable. She said it was, and then she whispered that she was glad he was there. 10 minutes later she came out looking like a different person. Then it was his turn. He handed the rope to both of them, told them his life was literally in their hands, and dove in. The hot water hit every layer of grime he had been carrying. Days of dried pig blood and bone grease washing away from his hair and skin in sheets. Every muscle he had been holding rigid for days finally unclenched. Every pore opened at once. It felt like being rebuilt from the outside in. He leaned against the shallow edge and closed his eyes. When he opened them, he noticed neither girl was exactly looking away the way they had demanded he do. He did not comment on it. He just closed his eyes again and let the water do its work. After they all cleaned up and changed into fresh clothes, they climbed back up to the main cave to start the fire. Suli asked if it would get out of control. He told her the truth. On a primeval forest this dense, once started, it could burn for months, maybe years. Su Yao worried about the animals, the big trees, the things living in the brush that had never done anything to them. He paused for a moment, then laid it out without softening any of it. The rotting carcasses outside were breeding bacteria that could kill them. The predators hidden in that jungle were not going to leave on their own. If burning one mountain was the price of their survival, he would pay it without hesitation. He lit the blowtorch, blue flame hissed and caught the alcohol-fueled blocks. The fire grew fast in the high-oxygen air. He told the girls to hand him the torch once he climbed out, then fall back inside immediately. He would be right behind them. Outside, 3 suns hammered down on bone-dry leaves and dead branches that had been waiting for exactly this moment. The giant boar carcass from before was nothing but enormous white ribs now, picked completely clean overnight by whatever had come to eat during the dark hours. He walked to the forest edge, said a quiet apology to no one in particular, and shoved the torch into the leaf litter. On a high-oxygen planet, there is no slow burn. The flames exploded upward like someone had poured gasoline on them. Blue-green fire shot waist-high in an instant. He moved fast, hitting 3 more spots before the fires connected and started swallowing trees whole. He pulled out his phone and recorded a quick video. First fire ever lit by human hands on another world. Even if the reason was survival and not ceremony, that fact deserved a record. The wind picked up behind him and threw sparks deep into the canopy. The heat climbed fast enough to feel dangerous even at a distance. He started feeding firewood into the cave entrance, legs he had collected earlier. And then something strange happened. A sound came from the forest that was not fire, not animal panic, something smaller and faster. Thousands of tiny feet sprinting across dry leaves. He looked back and his jaw dropped. Pouring out of the forest floor at the tree line were dozens of ginseng creatures, living ones, running for their lives, palms to half a meter tall, tiny red flowers on their heads, root legs spinning as fast as they could carry them away from the flames. Most scattered deeper into the jungle, but 3 panicked ones veered wrong and came stumbling straight toward the cave entrance. Across the open rocky ground, he crouched behind a boulder and waited. When they felt the cool air leaking from the cave, they ran inside on their own. He dove in right behind them. The heat outside was already close enough to singe eyebrows. He sealed the entrance with big rocks and cut off the inferno on the other side. The girls were screaming about monsters. The 3 ginseng had scared them badly enough that both of them had backed against the far wall. He told them these were not monsters. These were treasures. And the fire plant was already working exactly as intended. Getting the ginseng to cooperate was a different problem entirely. They had buried themselves in the soft dirt near the sleeping area, leaving only their tiny red flowers sticking out like they thought that counted as hiding. He grabbed one by the stem and pulled. The thing held on with everything it had underground. He could not budge it. He tapped his knife on the ground and made very clear that the alternative to coming out willingly was a soup pot. All 3 popped themselves out of the dirt and lay flat on the ground in complete surrender. They were about half a meter long, yellowish and wrinkled, shaped like fat radishes with 5 stubby limbs and vague little faces. Ugly cute was the only way to describe them. Su Yao poked one in the belly and noted that it was hard. He tied all 3 together with a strip of cloth and told her they were going underground. With the rest of the supplies, the cave temperature was rising fast from the inferno outside, even through solid rock walls. Time to move. Down at the underground river, he built a simple raised platform from the firewood they had dragged down, padded with stones and leaves. The 3 tied-up ginseng creatures lay on the ground looking deeply miserable about the situation they had found themselves in. Su Yao stared at them for a while, then asked quietly whether they were actually going to eat something that had arms and legs and could run. He was not entirely sure himself. These things had too much personality for comfort, but the question of toxicity needed answering before anything else. He decided on the smallest possible dose, a single root hair, thinner than a strand of human hair, pinched off with his fingernails. He chewed it, sweet, actually, and then it detonated inside his body. A wave of burning energy exploded from his stomach and rushed through every cell at once. His sore muscles went from aching to supercharged in seconds. His brain, which had been running on fumes for days, snapped fully awake like a fuse had been thrown. He literally left the ground. Suli panicked when she saw his face turn red. Su Yao screamed that his nose was bleeding, both nostrils pouring blood from one hair-sized fragment of the root. He had overdosed on a quantity too small to see the actual body of the plant, if consumed directly, would probably kill a human instantly. Knowing the potency changed how he approached this entirely. He set up the steel pot over a fire, river water, some fatty boar meat, and exactly 2 or 3 root hairs dropped into the broth. The smell that rose from that pot was something he had never encountered before. Rich, meaty, herbal sweetness underneath it all. The kind of scent that made your mouth water just from breathing the same air. They each drank a bowl. The effect started within seconds. Suli's skin, which had gone dull and rough from days of hard labor in alien conditions, turned smooth and luminous like polished jade. Su Yao's scraped knees and cut hands began healing visibly while they watched. Scabs formed, dried, fell away, and pink new skin appeared underneath in real time. Then things turned strange. The warmth inside them shifted into an itchy, tingling heat deep in the bones, and a layer of dark, greasy sludge began oozing from their pores. The smell was catastrophic. Su Yao announced that their pores were expelling something, and she was not wrong. He understood what was happening. The ginseng was forcing out decades of accumulated toxins, heavy metals, and biological debris through the skin. Purification, the old way, brutal and immediate. All 3 of them stripped and dove into the river without any discussion about modesty. They scrubbed the black gunk off in the hot water, and the transformation underneath was shocking. Suli's surface looking like she had been carved from jade, not a visible pore on her skin, luminous in the reflected light from the cave walls. Su Yao looked exactly the same. They were twins, after all. They stared at each other in stunned amazement. He checked his own reflection and had to admit he looked better than he ever had. The dark circles from years of late-night gaming were gone. His features looked cleaner, sharper. His muscles, when he stood up, were defined and dense in a way they had never been. Su Yao poked his abs and made a complimentary comment. Suli pretended she was not looking and then told him to get dressed before he caught a cold. Face completely red. Looking better was nice, but what actually mattered was what the ginseng had done to their functional strength. Because on a planet that was actively trying to end them, that edge could mean everything. That night, none of them could sleep. The ginseng's after effects were like running a current through every nerve at once, with nowhere for the energy to go. Eventually, Su Yao's brain ran out of power, and she passed out mid-complaint. That left him alone in the dark with Suli. She pulled him close under the covers and whispered something about wanting separate rooms in the cave, with her door left open at night, just for the 2 of them. He told her she had better not take that back. She buried her face in his chest and did not say another word. The next morning, he dragged both sisters out of bed and ran them through military-style exercises by the river, partly to burn off the excess ginseng energy, and partly because staying sharp was the only way to stay alive. They sheltered underground for 2 full days, training hard, eating roasted boar with ginseng broth, drinking boiled river water, waiting for the fire above to do its work. The results were unreal. The sisters could lift heavy rocks with ease. He could pick up the 100-pound hiking pack with one hand. When he finally judged the fire above had burned itself out, they climbed back up the tunnel. Clear passage, no new bats. The upper cave was intact, and then he looked at the portal, and everything stopped making sense. The timer read 10 minutes and 30 seconds. One day should have added roughly 1 minute, but he had been down there for 2 full days next to an inferno that had cooked the entire mountain from the outside. And that was the moment he understood. The portal did not just recover passively. It absorbed thermal energy. He'd accelerated the charge. The wildfire had supercharged it far beyond normal rate. That was huge. That was a controllable variable. That meant they could artificially extend their time on Earth by generating heat near the portal. Not just survive the charging cycle, but manage it. But the smoke meat stole the show first. 2 days of heat and smoke from the inferno outside had transformed thousands of pounds of raw meat strips into beautiful golden brown jerky, hanging across the walls like a harvest festival. Crispy outside, firm and chewy inside, smoky flavor baked in without a single grain of salt. Eating it sent warmth through the body with every bite. Su Yao grabbed a strip and started gnawing, face immediately covered in grease, eyes squeezed shut with joy. He wiped his hands and looked at the sealed cave entrance. Time to see what the fire had done outside. Time to see their new territory. He pushed the boulder away from the entrance by himself. Something that used to require all 3 of them working together moved under his hands alone. Hot air hit them like a wall as they stepped out, but their stronger bodies handled it without trouble. The ground was wet, warm puddles everywhere. That made no sense after a massive wildfire. and then a cold drop landed on his forehead. He looked up and his mind went blank. Emerging from behind the mountain was a flock of enormous birds, each one the size of a passenger jet, hundreds of them, blocking all three suns with their bodies. Their blue-gray bellies had a metallic shine, and hanging underneath each one were huge pouch-like structures dripping water in steady streams, like faucets left open. This planet had its own fire department, built right into the ecosystem, activated automatically, more efficient than any helicopter humans had ever built. He stood there watching them pass overhead, unable to speak, equal parts amazed and relieved at the sheer scale of what this world had designed for itself. Sully called out from inside, worried the silence meant danger. He reached both hands into the cave and pulled both sisters out into the light. The view silenced them immediately. Everything was white. A thick blanket of ash stretched as far as any of them could see, covering the ground like snow. Hundreds of blackened tree trunks rose from it like dark pillars, the massive ones too dense to burn completely, standing like monuments to what had been here. The jungle that had been hiding predators in every shadow, that had hemmed them in and terrified them since the moment they arrived, was gone. They could see for miles in every direction, clear sight lines to the horizon. No ambush cover left standing anywhere close. Su Yao whispered that she could not believe they had done this. He told her this was destruction and rebirth happening at the same time. Everything dangerous burned away, the ash beneath their feet, the best natural fertilizer this world could produce. New life would sprout from it within days. He spread his arms wide and told them this was the kingdom he had carved out for them, their farm, their settlement, their home. He named it Scorched Earth Farm and asked what they thought. Sully squeezed his hand and gave him a real smile. Not polite, not managed, a real one. She said it was their home. Su Yao was already bouncing through the ash, leaving small footprints everywhere, loudly planning which vegetable she wanted planted first, and which corner would become her flower garden. He pulled them both toward the old battlefield, because destruction leaves behind more than just ash. Sometimes it leaves behind tools. The giant boar was nothing but a massive skeleton now, lying quietly in the white. The fire had burned away every scrap of flesh and left the bones clean. But something was wrong with the tusks and teeth. They had not gone black and brittle from the heat the way normal bone would. Instead, they gleamed with a cold metallic shine. The dinosaur teeth had turned a dark blue-green color, almost translucent and razor-sharp. He grabbed one and pulled it free, ice cold in his hand. Heavy, with the weight of something much denser than bone, the fire had done something extraordinary. The animal's body fat and biological energy had created extreme temperatures during the burn, essentially tempering the teeth the same way a blacksmith forges steel over coals. He swung the tooth at a charred tree trunk. These alien trees were so hard that even a mountain axe could not scratch them. The tooth sliced through without resistance. The cut was perfectly smooth, not a splinter anywhere. He looked at the bone piles with entirely different eyes. Boar tusks, dinosaur teeth, sharpened claws. This was not a graveyard. This was an open-air armory, and everything in it was free. They spent 20 minutes harvesting every glowing fang and claw they could find. Even when the bullets eventually ran out, they would have weapons. Back inside, he checked the portal, deep green and fully charged. 10 minutes and 30 seconds waiting for him. He started packing his bag for the trip home, moving fast and thinking faster. Handfuls of the glowing cave minerals first. Potential energy source or research material either way. Then one of the smaller ginseng creatures, about half a meter tall, 40 pounds, that had given up fighting entirely. The plan was simple. The portal drops him at a random location, if it's anywhere in China. He hands everything directly to the military or the police. These samples are once-in-history material. But if it drops him in a foreign country again, he is bringing everything back. No way he hands alien treasures to outsiders. The goodbye was harder than he expected. Sully brushed ash off his clothes with red eyes and told him to come back safe, even if that meant coming back empty-handed. Su Yao hugged his waist and buried her face against his chest, saying quietly that they would be scared without him. He told them to seal the entrance, keep the loaded shotgun within reach at all times, and run to the underground river immediately if anything went wrong. He took one last look at these two girls who had placed their complete trust in him, turned around, and stepped through the green light. Car engines, people talking, glass buildings bouncing sunlight back at him from every angle. He blinked and took in where he had landed, Nanjing Road, Shanghai, one of the busiest shopping streets in the world. People stopped and stared. He could not blame them. His tactical jacket was ripped and smeared with ash and pig grease. He had a mask over his face, a bulging pack on his back, and a glowing bone blade in his hand. But this was Shanghai's fashion district, so nobody panicked. Half the crowd assumed it was performance art or some kind of post-apocalyptic runway concept. Girls ran up with notebooks asking for autographs. He ignored all of it and ducked into the shadow of a building to assess. The timer showed 10 minutes and 25 seconds. A notification confirmed he had brought objects through the portal. Another notice flagged that intelligent life cannot remain on Earth permanently, that the countdown would send anything living back when it hit 0. But the ginseng had been tagged as a high-energy plant resource eligible to remain, not considered a living creature, apparently, despite having legs and a running habit. Just a soulless vegetable, according to whatever interdimensional classification system governed these things. He needed to contact the authorities immediately. The foreign SIM from his last trip had no signal in China. Borrowing a stranger's phone while looking like a masked maniac, carrying a bone weapon would cost him minutes he did not have. He spotted a young woman live streaming nearby with an unlocked phone in her hand. Clear signal, no screen lock. He moved toward her. What he did not know was that 1 minute earlier, in Shanghai's surveillance command center, alarms had already been triggered. The facial recognition system had flagged him the second he materialized on the street. His face was on a priority watch list from the highest levels of government. Within 5 seconds, encrypted orders went to every armed unit in the city. Get to Nanjing Road. Protect the target. Anyone who interferes faces treason charges. He did not know any of that, so he walked up to the live streaming girl, took the phone from her hand, and kept moving. She screamed. The street went chaotic. Her live stream was still running with tens of thousands of viewers watching in real time. Then the phone locked with face recognition, and he had to go back to her. She was on the ground, terrified, convinced she was about to die. He crouched down, held the phone in front of her face, told her to look at the screen and nod. She did. Phone unlocked. He told her he was borrowing it for 5 minutes and that the government would reward her for giving them his name. The mall security guards came running with batons, yelling at him to drop the weapon. He put the bone blade away and started dialing. The phone barely rang twice before the street shook with engine roars. Black armored vehicles smashed through the pedestrian barriers and drove straight onto Nanjing Road. The military helicopters appeared overhead, hovering low, rotors flattening everything under them with their downdraft. Dozens of fully armed special forces poured out of the vehicles. Military trucks followed behind them. Hundreds of soldiers set up a complete perimeter, locking down 500 meters. In every direction, the 2 security guards went pale. The person they had been about to tackle with plastic batons had the entire city's military mobilized for him. A senior officer with colonel rank on his shoulders marched straight up, looked at the ash-covered clothes and the bone blade, and snapped to a perfect military salute. He introduced himself as commander of the Shanghai Special Operations Unit and said they were sorry they were late. Looking at those familiar uniforms, those young determined faces, the red flag on the helicopters above, something in his chest unclenched for the first time in what felt like forever. He returned the best salute he could manage and told them they were not late. They were exactly on time. He handed the phone back to the live streaming girl and asked the officer to compensate her. He had cracked the screen when he grabbed it and scared her badly. The officer confirmed they would arrange a car to take her home, plus a national security contribution bonus of at least 500,000 yuan. The girl sat on the ground trying to process how getting her phone grabbed had somehow converted into a government reward. 8 minutes and 30 seconds remaining. No time for extended conversation. The Special Forces captain handed him an encrypted military satellite phone, already connected to headquarters, and a strategist on the other end was already speaking before he finished raising it to his ear. Supplies were airborne, 5 minutes from his location. He needed to describe the world on the other side so they could activate the correct support plan. He gave them everything as fast as he could. High oxygen, lower gravity, prehistoric biosphere. 3 survivors, 1 cave, 1 underground river. No way to bring living people through. Only dead objects can cross permanently. Dinosaurs with hides too thick for standard ammunition. A wildfire clearing that had given them breathing room and soil for farming. Living ginseng creatures with medicinal properties beyond anything currently known to science. In a command center somewhere in the city. A room full of generals and scientists and hundreds of support personnel. Listened to every word he said. When they heard about the giant creatures and how the shotgun barely scratched them, the lead general hit a button on his desk without hesitation. He explained that they had already mapped out contingency support packages for every conceivable type of world that could exist behind a portal. Plan 8 was specifically designed for environments full of massive dangerous creatures. Shanghai's arsenal had the latest heavy anti-armor weapons built for exactly this situation. They would arrive at his location in 5 minutes. Hearing that almost made him dizzy with relief. While he had been worrying about his shotgun bouncing off dinosaur skin, an entire nation had already prepared a dragon-slaying toolkit for him. He called out his supply list while the military recorded every word. Solar panels, high-capacity battery storage, high-yield seeds, corn, tomatoes, potatoes, chili peppers. The soil over there was fertile beyond anything Earth's agriculture could explain, and they needed to use it. High-explosive grenades for the things bullets could not stop. Shampoo, conditioner, body wash, toothbrushes, multiple sizes and types of sanitary supplies for both sisters. Enough for 6 months minimum. 10 top-of-the-line phones loaded with entertainment content and survival tutorial videos. Power banks and chargers for everything. Salt, soy sauce, chicken powder, hot pot base, antibiotics, vitamins, insect repellent. The general confirmed that every item had already been anticipated and prepared. They had been building this manifest for a long time. Then the line switched and a voice came through that made the organized military efficiency suddenly feel very complicated. Annie Sue, the twins' mother, was on the other end, trembling, crying. She called him by his name and apologized immediately. She had doubted him before, she said, but after watching the videos he had left on his phone, she understood everything. He had been protecting her daughters all along. Without him, they would have died on that planet. She offered him half the shares of the entire corporation if they made it home. If they could not come back, she just wanted them to stay alive. He listened to her cry and felt a wave of guilt that surprised him, because her two daughters had already given him their trust in ways that went considerably beyond a simple survival partnership. He coughed and stumbled through his response, told her they were doing fine, eating well, even getting a little round face from the boar meat. He promised to treat them like family. He mentioned the ginseng and said half of it was for her. He told her to use a tiny root hair when she felt weak and not to be shy about it. After hanging up, he exhaled slowly. At least his future mother-in-law had some peace of mind. Then white vans broke through the perimeter and a medical team jumped out. Not old professors with clipboards. 7 or 8 tall women in white protective suits carrying scanning equipment. They put up privacy curtains and told him to strip completely for a full biological scan. He turned red. Having a team of professional strangers examine every inch of him was mortifying. But the alternative scenario that occurred to him made the actual situation feel considerably more acceptable. The lead doctor, warm and composed, told him in her professional view all bodies were the same, and promised to be quick and gentle. 90 seconds later the results came in and her eyes went wide. She reported to the commanding officer that his body had surpassed human limits in every measurable category. Muscle density and bone strength more than double any elite athlete on record. Internal environment completely clean, no alien viruses, bacteria, parasites, or even common earth pathogens detectable anywhere in his system. She looked at him and said his body represented a perfectly evolved superhuman specimen. He let out the breath he had been holding for days. He had been terrified that eating raw ginseng and drinking untested underground river water might have planted something slow and dangerous inside all 3 of them. This report was the best news he had received since landing on that planet. The portal must have adapted their biology when it first transported them, building immunity to alien threats directly into their systems. No more fear hiding in the back of his mind every time they ate something new. 3 minutes left. The medical team packed up. A military truck stopped directly in front of him and supplies began coming out, organized into tactical packs ready to carry. An officer brought out a scale and asked him to step on. The number stopped at 120.5 kilograms. Everyone nearby stared. He looked lean and defined, not like someone approaching to 150 pounds. But the ginseng had not just purified his body. It had dramatically increased bone and muscle density. He was essentially a human-shaped tank, wearing regular skin. His body weight determined carrying capacity through the portal. 120 kilograms of him meant 120 kilograms of supplies could come along. The officer started calling out loading orders immediately. He stopped them first. He unloaded his old pack and shook out everything that had come from the other side. A dozen glowing minerals tumbled across the pavement, casting faint colored light in every direction. Then he reached in and yanked out the ginseng creature. Half a meter of flailing limbs and screaming root tendrils erupted from the bag, slapping his arms in full panic. Every single person watching lost composure simultaneously, top officials, scientists, soldiers, all of them standing with their jaws hanging open. A white-haired academy member rushed forward with trembling hands and took the ginseng like he was receiving something sacred. One breath of the medicinal scent and years of chronic health problems visibly eased across his face. He clutched it to his chest with tears on his cheeks, calling it a national treasure. The Shanghai commander personally collected the glowing minerals from the pavement and had them sealed in lead containers for transport to the capital. Then the loading began in earnest. Soldiers strapped supplies across every surface of his body. Across his chest, they mounted two of the newest weapons from Plan 8, designated the QBZ-190, the modified super heavy armor-piercing platform. The drum magazines were loaded with 22mm tungsten core rounds designed specifically for killing massive creatures in high-oxygen, low-gravity environments. Solar panel array on his back, high-explosive grenades and medical kits around his waist. Oversized tactical pistols on both thighs, seeds, phones, chargers, hygiene products, seasonings, and medicine stuffed into every gap. Total weight, exactly 240 pounds pressing down on his frame. He wobbled for 1 second when they finished loading, then planted his feet and stood rock solid. The officer watching shook his head and called him a super soldier. 10 seconds left. The Shanghai commander gripped his hand tight and told him to take care of himself. They were researching the portal's signal frequency and hoped to find a way to establish a more direct connection soon. He looked around at everyone present one last time. Special forces at attention, combat medics with their gear, scientists cradling alien minerals in padded cases, soldiers on the perimeter, helicopters circling overhead with red flags on their tails. This was what real backup felt like, an entire country standing behind one person. The Special Forces captain filled his lungs and roared a single command, "Salute." On Nanjing Road, one of the busiest shopping streets in the world, now cleared of every civilian, hundreds of military and police personnel snapped their arms up in perfect unison. Rows upon rows of crisp salutes aimed at the man who 10 minutes ago had been mistaken for a street performer and then a phone thief. 1 second left. He flashed them the biggest smile he had and shouted that he was leaving, and that his next visit might not be in 3 days, could be longer, could be shorter, depended on the fire. Then space bent around him, in front of hundreds of watching eyes and countless recording devices. His body collapsed into a point of light and vanished. Every trace he left behind, footprints, scattered ash, even the indentations in the pavement, was wiped clean by some invisible force. Nothing remained where he had stood. A monitoring scientist stared at his instruments in disbelief and reported that his equipment had detected absolutely nothing. No energy spike, no electromagnetic signature, no gravitational disturbance. 120 kilograms of mass had just been teleported across dimensions and not a single sensor registered it. Whatever civilization had built the portal operated on physics that current human understanding had not even begun to imagine. The commander stared at the empty spot for a long moment. Then he gave his orders. Lock down all information, escort the bone blade, the minerals, and the ginseng to the capital under maximum security. Bring Annie Sue along, because half the ginseng had been specifically allocated to her, and her opinion on handling it mattered. His final order was short and decisive. Plan 8, originally a hypothetical contingency scenario, was now upgraded to an active official operation. The nation was preparing for war against monsters on another world, and they were not planning to let him fight alone forever. Back on the alien planet, the moment the green light faded, the cave felt different. The girls told him every detail afterward, so he knew exactly what happened while he was gone. The instant he disappeared, the temperature seemed to drop, not physically, emotionally. The warmth and confidence he had spent so much energy projecting for them vanished with him through the light. He had sealed the entrance tight before leaving, only small ventilation gaps and a shooting hole remaining, but none of that architecture could address the particular kind of fear That comes from sitting alone on an alien planet waiting for someone to come back. Suli and Su Yao sat back to back right next to where the portal had been. Suli held the Remington shotgun with the barrel angled down, finger off the trigger, but grip and posture textbook tactical ready. Her form, he later found out, was better than his own, and that surprised him more than almost anything else that happened. During their time on that planet, Su Yao hugged her knees and rested her head on her sister's shoulder, and said she had only been gone 5 minutes, but she already missed him. Suli wanted to scold her for being clingy. The words would not come out. She admitted instead that she felt exactly the same way. Su Yao teased her sister about the night after the ginseng soup. Suli turned bright red and ordered guard duty silence, but inside, she was thinking about how completely things had shifted. Back at school she had been the untouchable campus beauty. He had been someone she barely registered, working a part-time job for hourly wages. Now he was the ceiling, the floor, the single thing standing between them and everything on this planet that wanted them dead. She whispered under her breath for him to come back safe, and then everything changed in an instant. A sound cut through the wind and slipped into the cave through the gaps in the sealed entrance. Not an animal sound, not the grunt of a boar or the distant roar of a dinosaur. It sounded almost human, like a woman shouting, but wrapped in something primal and animal underneath. The kind of sound that triggers instincts older than rational thought. Su Yao's ginseng-enhanced hearing kicked into full operation. Her ears practically twitched. She was on her feet in less than a second. Multiple targets, she said. Light footsteps, numerous, getting closer. Her enhanced senses had picked up the approach before any normal person would have registered a sound at all. And this was the part that made him genuinely proud when he heard about it later. Suli did not panic. She did not freeze or hide. She grabbed her sister's shoulder and pushed her down and took command, like she had done it her whole life. She racked the shotgun slide to check the chamber, clicked off the safety, and moved in a low crouch toward the shooting hole near the entrance. Every motion smooth and practiced. It made sense once she explained. Their mother had taken her to real firearms ranges abroad every year starting at age 12. She had handled more real weapons in her life than he had ever seen outside of video games. She just never showed it because when he was present, she was happy to be the protected one. But with him gone, the older sister instinct took over completely. She pressed the stock into her shoulder, lined up the sights through the gap in the rocks, and scanned the burned landscape outside. Out by the edge of the charred forest she spotted them. Several white figures moving through the ash and smoke, upright posture, balanced proportions, walking the way thinking creatures walk, using fallen tree trunks as a size reference. She estimated each one stood at least 3 meters tall. Their skin was between pale white and light yellow. They wore clothing made from animal hides and woven grass. Some had tools hanging from their waists that resembled primitive axes. They were communicating in something that had rhythm and variation. And on top of each of their heads, the fuzzy protrusions twitched and swiveled with each movement. Animal ears, she thought, or something that looked very much like them. These giants were not hunting. They were scavenging the burned forest, collecting animals killed by the fire. Celebrating finds the way a hunting party celebrates after a successful run. Suli watched through the shotgun sights with controlled breathing and told Su Yao that if any of them came near their rocky area, she would open fire without hesitation. He left this home in her hands. She was not going to let anyone take a single piece of their smoked meat before he came back. In that moment, the pampered, wealthy girl from the campus was completely gone. She was a mother lion guarding her territory. Su Yao crouched behind her, holding a box of slug rounds ready to pass forward. The two sisters held the cave in silence and stillness while giants moved through the ash. 200 meters away, the giants stayed at the edge of the burn zone, gathered what they wanted, and eventually turned west and left. 2 of them had turned toward the cave at one point, ears rotating, apparently picking up the sound of the sisters whispering from over 100 meters away. That kind of hearing was terrifying, but they had enough food and decided to move on. Suli kept the shotgun trained on them until they disappeared from sight. Only then did she lower it, and by then her back was soaked through with sweat, and her arms were aching from holding steady so long. About a minute after the giants vanished, the portal lit up and he came crashing back into the cave like a walking mountain of gear. He could barely see past everything strapped to his body, solar panels sticking up behind his head, rifles hanging from his chest, bags in both hands, supplies filling every gap and pocket. The moment his voice echoed through the cave, All of Suli's warrior composure dissolved instantly. The woman, who had been holding a shotgun with cold, steady hands, transformed back into someone who just wanted her person to come home safe. Su Yao did not wait. She sprinted at him like a small cannonball, leaped into the air, wrapped her legs around his waist, and locked her arms around his neck. He stumbled under the weight of her plus the 240 pounds already on his body, and grabbed her before she could fall. She buried her face in his neck and rubbed against him like a contented cat, then looked up with bright eyes demanding praise. She was the one who heard the giants first, she announced, even before her sister. He got serious when he heard about intruders, but he still pinched her nose and gave her a small pat on the head. Number one hero of the house, he confirmed. She planted a kiss on his cheek and looked extremely pleased with herself and slightly smug toward her sister. Suli did not compete. She just nodded and confirmed that without Su Yao's early warning, she would not have reacted as quickly as she did. Then she gave him the full report. Humanoid, upright posture, balanced proportions, clothing made from hides, tools at their waists, skin pale to near white, at least 3 meters tall, ears that moved independently and could hear whispers from 200 meters through sealed rock walls. They had come from the west to scavenge the fire zone and left with their food. They had not approached the cave, but their senses were more than sharp enough to know something was inside. That last detail worried him most. Intelligent creatures that lived in groups, wore clothes, used tools, and had superhuman hearing were infinitely more dangerous than any mindless predator. A dinosaur charges at you and you shoot it. A thinking being studies you first, learns your patterns, and comes back with a plan. He opened the black waterproof case from one of the military packs. Inside sat for small drones, a red signal beacon, and a military-grade tablet computer. He explained the beacon first. Every time he traveled back to Earth, he landed at a random location. With this device, the moment he materialized anywhere on Earth, the signal would activate and the government could locate him within seconds, no matter where. The portal spat him out. He would never be truly alone again. Then he picked up one of the drones, less than 50 centimeters across, silent rotors, thermal imaging through darkness and foliage, night vision, 120-kilometer flight range, on a single charge, automatic return to base programming, military technology that did not exist on any civilian market anywhere in the world. He linked it to the tablet, and the screen immediately showed a crisp live feed of the cave interior. Time to find out who their new neighbors were. He piloted the drone out through a ventilation gap and immediately embarrassed himself. The thing wobbled like a confused insect. He nearly crashed it into a burned tree trunk, then almost drove it into the ground. His fingers were completely wrong for the controls. Su Yao watched for about 30 seconds before she burst out laughing and called him the worst pilot she had ever seen. Suli calmly suggested handing the controls to her sister, who had collected dozens of drones at home, from beginner toys to professional racing models. He looked at Su Yao's outstretched hands and gave up his pride entirely. The drone that had been having a seizure under his control froze in perfect stable hover. The instant her hands touched the tablet, then she pushed the stick and the machine shot through the air, in a smooth arc, climbing fast and clean like it was on invisible rails. The girl, who appeared to do nothing but eat and sleep, was secretly a top-tier drone operator. He shook his head and admitted out loud that she was impressive. As the drone climbed higher, the screen revealed their surroundings in full for the first time. The cave they had been living in was a tiny bump at the base of an absolutely enormous mountain, rising thousands of meters into the sky and punching straight through the cloud layer above. But the truly shocking part came from what the fire had exposed. With the surface vegetation burned away, the entire mountainside was visible, and every exposed surface glittered and reflected light, exactly like the minerals inside their cave. The whole mountain was built from the same material. They were not just living in a cave with some glowing rocks. They were sitting at the base of a gemstone mountain, and the quantity was beyond any calculation of value. No wonder the giant boar had failed to smash through their cave walls. The entire structure was made from something harder than anything that animal could break. Su Yao steered the drone west, following the direction of the giant's retreat. After a few minutes scanning the burn zone edge, she spotted them. White figures moving through charred forest, easy to see against the dark background. She slowed the approach and zoomed the camera in tight, bringing the high-definition image up on screen. All three of them went completely quiet. Su Yao broke the silence first by nearly screaming with excitement. She grabbed her sister's arm and announced that these were Beast Girl women with real animal ears. Actual fluffy ones, exactly like the accessories she had once found hidden in Suli's closet. Suli's composure shattered into a deep red blush. She stammered that those items were for a convention, she barely ever wore them. He gave her a look that said he now had important information about her personal interests, and she immediately looked like she wanted the cave floor to swallow her. But once he focused on the screen, he could not blame anyone for losing composure. These beings were about 3 meters tall, just as estimated. Their facial proportions were not just human-like. They were beyond human in their symmetry and clarity, skin pale and almost luminous. Silver-white hair long and loose down their backs. They wore simple brown hide wraps, but those small pieces of leather struggled to contain their physiques. Legs impossibly long and toned with visible muscle that suggested raw, effortless power. On top of each head sat a pair of animal ears covered in soft fur, some pointed like a fox or cat, others more rounded, twitching and rotating with every sound in their environment. These were not primitive cave creatures. They moved with grace and clear purpose, communicated in what sounded like structured language, carried tools. An intelligent species with culture. That happened to look like something out of an extremely specific category of illustrated fiction. Suli noticed him staring and asked in a dangerously sweet voice whether he found them attractive. His survival instincts worked faster than his honesty. He told her he was strictly analyzing the tactical situation. She did not look remotely convinced. And then the screen showed something that killed every other thought in the room. The woman walking at the back of the group suddenly stopped. Her ears shot straight up. She had heard the drone from 200 meters away through a machine specifically engineered for silent operation. She spun around, pale golden eyes with vertical slit pupils locked directly onto the drone's position. Before he could finish yelling at Su Yao to pull the drone back, the creature grabbed a rock from the ground and threw it without even taking a proper stance. The stone moved so fast the camera only caught a blur, then the screen went black. Signal lost. Su Yao stared at the dead tablet with her mouth hanging open. He swallowed hard. From 200 meters. A casual throw had destroyed a military-grade stealth drone. That was not good aim. That was superhuman arm strength, like a living catapult wearing a fur wrap. He looked at the girls and told them their new neighbors were not just beautiful. They were terrifyingly strong, and now they knew something had been watching them. Su Yao was devastated about the drone. He rubbed her head and pulled out another identical unit from the case. 3 spares remaining. She could have one more, but this time they needed to be significantly smarter. No getting close enough for those women to swat them out of the sky again. The mission was simple. Find their home base and map the surrounding territory. Losing another drone was not an option. Su Yao snapped back into focus, saluted him like a little soldier, and launched the second drone. This time she sent it straight up to 500 meters before pushing forward. At that altitude, the machine was practically invisible from the ground. As the drone climbed, the military tablets on board AI began building a real-time map of everything below. The view was breathtaking. Behind them, the Crystal Mountain towered thousands of meters into the sky, every exposed surface glittering against the 3 suns. At its base, the semicircular burn zone he had created stretched 30 to 40 kilometers in radius, a massive dark scar stamped onto the planet's surface. Beyond that boundary, untouched primeval forests rolled in every direction. Trees hundreds of meters tall with purple and blue leaves layered over each other, glowing seed pods drifting through the air, 6-legged herbivores wandering the forest floor, winged lizards the size of hang gliders soaring between trunks, an alien jungle that looked exactly like the science fiction movies he had spent his life watching, except it was real, and they were living in the middle of it. Su Yao locked the drone's camera onto the white figures moving through the trees below. Even at 500 meters, the lead bestial woman sensed something. She snapped her head upward, golden eyes narrowing, and reached for a rock. His blood went cold. But the altitude was too much even for her. She hesitated, then signaled her group to move faster instead. They were incredibly fast. Each leap carried them 10 to 15 meters through the tangled forest. They cleared obstacles like gravity was optional. The drone had to fly at half speed just to keep them in frame. After tracking them for about 30 minutes across 50 kilometers of dense jungle, the terrain opened into a clearing where several large feathered dinosaurs rested on the ground. The bestial women jogged up to these creatures, swung onto their backs with practiced ease, and the dinosaurs launched forward at full sprint. They had tamed riding dinosaurs, transportation, infrastructure. These were not simple beings playing at civilization. The drone followed them over a ridge, and the settlement appeared below. A massive natural cave with a wide, tall entrance. Fences built from giant bones and timber enclosing pens where fat flightless birds and small herbivore dinosaurs were being raised as livestock. Organized, functional primitive farming. But on the left side of the cave entrance stood something that did not belong anywhere near the rest of it. A huge black rectangular slab, smooth and perfectly shaped, clean edges, elegant proportions, reflective surface gleaming in the sunlight. Suyao tilted her head and said it looked like a giant smartphone. She was right. The shape, the black panel, the rounded corners, everything about it screamed manufactured technology. Yet, several adult bestiar women knelt before it in worship, bowing and chanting. He noticed more contradictions. Most of the women carried crude stone axes and wore animal hides, but some who appeared to hold higher status wore necklaces made from what looked like metal gears and fragments that resembled circuit boards, advanced technology mixed with Stone Age tools. Whatever high civilization had produced those objects had clearly been here before, had visited this planet, had left marks that persisted long after the civilization itself was gone. Then the entire tribe emerged into the open and the full scale became clear. About 200 individuals total, every single one female. Not one male in the entire settlement. None of them appeared elderly. He watched one adult casually pick up a boulder that would need the humans, just to wrap their arms around and do single-arm squats with it, switching hands like it weighed nothing. A returning hunting party dragged in the equivalent of half a mammoth-sized carcass between them. But the moment that made his stomach genuinely drop was the children. A small girl ran too fast while playing, failed to stop, and crashed headfirst into a tree trunk as thick as a human thigh. The tree snapped clean in half. The child rubbed her forehead, giggled, and kept running. All three of them swallowed at exactly the same time. He stared at that broken tree and felt phantom pain in places he had not been hit. An 8-year-old child had just casually snapped a tree he probably could not cut with an axe. There were over 200 of these beings below. His shiny new armor-piercing rifles suddenly felt considerably less impressive. He marked their location on a digital map with a red skull icon, 73 kilometers from their cave, roughly 1 hour away on dinosaur back if they decided to come visiting. He laid it out straight for the girls. These were a true warrior race. Their current firepower was not even enough to reliably annoy a species whose children shattered trees by accident. Suyao asked what they should do about it. He rubbed his hands together and looked at the screen showing 200 powerful beings, living in rough conditions with stone tools and no advanced medicine. He said the smart move was not to fight them, it was to outcharm them. He paused and repeated that word with a slightly different emphasis. Yes, outcharm them. The cave went quiet. Suli's expression froze on her face. She slowly narrowed her eyes and asked, with dangerous precision, exactly which meaning of that word he intended. He found the cave ceiling suddenly very interesting to look at. He coughed, told Suya to recall the drone before the battery died, and announced that priorities came first. Suli did not get her answer, but later she told him she had figured out that he deliberately dodged rather than lying to her face. In her mind, that meant he cared too much about her feelings to be dishonest. She decided that was actually sweeter than any direct answer would have been. He had no counter to that logic. Women think in strange and terrifying ways. Over the following days they built their settlement in earnest. He set up for large foldable solar panels on an elevated sunny spot, running cables down to a battery unit that clicked on and read 95% charge almost immediately. Just like that, they jumped from the Stone Age to the electrical age, lights, device charging, drone operations, all of it now available without limit. With 3 suns taking shifts across the sky, the panels almost never stopped generating power. The battery refilled itself completely by morning every single day. He mounted the QBZ-192 on a tripod at the cave entrance and connected the smart fire control computer. A red laser designator shot out and placed a bright dot on a tree trunk 100 meters away. Automated targeting, automated tracking, automated response when set to defense mode. He wanted to know what this weapon could actually do before trusting it with their lives. He shouldered it, 30 kilograms of solid engineering, braced the stock firmly, and squeezed the trigger. The sound was not a gunshot. It was thunder cracking directly next to his ears. Suyao and Suli slammed their hands over their heads and dropped. Downrange, The 2-meter-wide charred tree trunk had a hole blown clean through its center, the size of a wash basin, perfectly punched from front to back. The entire tree shuddered, cracked at the wound, and toppled over with a ground-shaking crash. He stared at the weapon in his hands with something very close to love. One shot would go straight through a dinosaur from one side to the other. Nothing they had encountered on this planet could survive a direct hit. With this mounted at their front door on automated mode, their cave entrance was a kill zone. Anything that wandered too close without permission was going to receive a tungsten core education at 2,000 meters per second. For the first time since landing on this alien world, he went to bed that night without keeping one eye open. That same night, they stood outside under the alien sky to experience it properly for the first time, with real security behind them and light waiting inside when they wanted it. Su Yao noticed something strange. No moon, almost no stars, just a massive black ceiling of nothing above them. Then a faint blue-green glow appeared along the horizon, and what rose after it broke every concept of scale any of them had ever known. A planet came up over the edge of the world, not a moon. A planet so enormous that the human brain simply could not process what the eyes were reporting. As it climbed, it filled half the entire sky, oceans visible on its surface. Deep blue and vast between enormous green continents covered in vegetation. Cloud spirals turning slowly across its face. Everything detailed enough to look close enough to touch. The psychological pressure was crushing. Every instinct screamed that collision was seconds away, that this thing was falling toward them. Su Yao grabbed his waist and buried her face in his chest, crying that it was going to fall on them. Su Li went pale and started pulling him toward the cave. They scrambled inside. He hit the light switch. White electric light flooded every corner, and the fear shrank instantly to something manageable. The familiar warm glow pushed back the cosmic horror they had just witnessed. Su Yao looked up at the ceiling light and started crying, not from fear this time, from relief. For over 10 nights on this planet the girls had huddled in near total darkness. Now they had real light, a piece of home carried into this alien hell. Su Li reached up toward the light like she wanted to hold it, and whispered that they finally did not have to fumble in the dark anymore. By silent mutual agreement, all three decided to stop thinking about the terrifying sky object hanging outside. Some knowledge is better left unprocessed until morning. The mood recovered fast. The cave filled with laughter and the smell of food, roasted dodo bird, ginseng drinks, dried meat strips. Su Yao had her phone propped up watching a comedy show, laughing so hard she could barely chew the chunk of bird in her cheeks. Su Li sat beside her, watching a historical drama on her own phone, looking more relaxed than he had seen her since they arrived. He lay back with his head on Su Yao's lap. She fed him pieces of dried meat without looking away from her screen, just reaching down and placing strips into his mouth whenever he opened it. Emperor treatment. If he blocked out everything outside, this was a perfect lazy evening. Better than home, actually. No bills, no boss, no alarm clock. Su Yao passed out mid-yawn, curled against him like a satisfied cat. He carried her to the sleeping area and tucked her in. Su Li followed. He turned off the main light and the cave went dim, lit only by the faint mineral glow in the walls. He told her to get some sleep. She did not move. In the dim light she was watching him with her cheeks flush pink, her eyes slightly unfocused in a way that made the air feel heavier. She slid closer. Her fingers traced a slow line from his arm down to his waist, and every point of contact sent a jolt through his skin. She leaned close to his ear and whispered that Su Yao was asleep now. Every nerve in his body registered that statement immediately. He told her she was being reckless because her sister had only just fallen asleep and was lying right beside them. Then, being honest about his own intentions, he suggested they could step outside instead. She gave him a look that could have melted steel and told him that, when the giant planet appeared in the sky, she had genuinely believed she was going to die. She had never been in a relationship before and did not want to leave this world with regrets. Then she pulled the blanket over both of them and disappeared underneath it. Half an hour later, Su Li was sound asleep with the most peaceful expression he had ever seen on her face. He could not sleep. He pulled on his jacket and walked outside alone into the alien night, where one of the ginseng guards poked its head up from the dirt to check on him, tiny eyes questioning. He kicked it gently and told it to go back to sleep. Next morning, both sisters dragged him out of his dreams with their hands. Su Li's eyes kept darting away from his when he looked at her, and he noticed that immediately and could not stop smiling. She punched his arm and told him to stop being smug and come outside immediately, because their seeds had sprouted overnight. That woke him up fast. They pushed the boulder open and stepped out. What he saw made his jaw drop. The dead gray world they had gone to sleep in had exploded with green. Every seed they had planted the previous day had not just sprouted. It was already growing at a rate that made no biological sense on any planet he had previously been familiar with. The corn seedlings were knee-high with thick, wide leaves. The tomato plants had already branched out and were showing tiny flower buds. Everything lush and impossibly healthy, all of it emerging within a single night of planting. Suyao rubbed her eyes and asked if they had somehow slept for 10 days without noticing. He crouched and touched the corn leaves, bursting with vitality. At this rate, he estimated they could be eating fresh corn and tomatoes within a week. That was beyond anything Earth agriculture could explain. Across the entire burnt landscape, the scorched earth was pushing up green shoots everywhere. Tiny grass blades and baby trees cracking through the ash layer, dotting the gray canvas with bright color. Suli asked why everything was growing so fast. Even with rich soil, this was not normal. He thought about it honestly and admitted he had no idea. Maybe the high oxygen accelerated plant metabolism. Maybe the alien soil had nutrients humans had never studied. Maybe 3 suns provided some enhanced photosynthesis effect no terrestrial botanist had ever observed. He told her the answer was probably something covered in second-year university courses that he had not taken yet. Suyao declared she did not care about the science at all. Any principle that made food grow faster was a good principle, and she stood by that. He could not argue with it. For days passed in a blur of hard work and impossible growth. When the 3 suns rose on the 4th morning, the landscape outside looked nothing like the burned wasteland they had created. Suyao stood in their field, wearing a leaf hat she had woven herself, fighting a losing battle against alien weeds that had grown back to waist height overnight. The crops from Earth had gone completely insane. He stood in what he could only describe as a corn forest, and for days the plants had shot past 5 meters tall, stalks as thick as green pillars. He peeled back a husk and found golden kernels the size of broad beans inside, each cob at least 60 centimeters long, more like a golden war club than anything from a grocery store. One ear alone could feed all 3 of them for a full meal. The tomatoes were worse. Each one had grown to the size of a basketball, bright red and heavy enough to bend the support frames he had cut. Suli stood at the potato patch, watching cracks form in the soil as underground tubers tried to force themselves out on their own. 2 yellow blurs shot out from between the corn stalks and sprinted toward him. There the ginseng workers, each clutching a bundle of pulled weeds taller than themselves, dropped the load at his feet and looked up with eager faces expecting their reward. These 2 were completely transformed from the sulking captives of their first days. Fat and glossy now, their wrinkled skin smooth and round, red flowers blooming brighter than ever. He had removed the red ropes days ago because there was no need for them. Between the plant nutrient liquid he gave as payment and the white rabbit milk candies, Suyao kept sneaking them as personal bribes. They were thoroughly and completely corrupted. They would not have left even if he chased them away. He dripped some diluted nutrient solution onto their head flowers. Both ginseng flopped onto their backs with blissful expressions, limbs spread out, twitchy with pleasure. Perfect unpaid interns turned loyal employees. But he remembered something Suli mentioned. The defensive perimeter they had planted 2 days earlier. The ring of experimental hot pepper seeds around the outer territory. The memory made all 3 of them went simultaneously before a word was spoken. Those pepper plants had matured overnight, half a meter long, curved like red ram's horns, and looking almost beautiful until you got within range of the invisible cloud of capsaicin they were producing. Suyao had gotten close first. The chemical wall hit her face, and she doubled over coughing so hard he thought she might pass out. He and Suli were right behind her and got the same treatment. Eyes burning, throat scorched, all 3 of them cried behind wet towels while they dug the plants up with shovels. If the alien soil had mutated those peppers past the threshold that their enhanced human bodies could handle, he could only imagine what those fumes would do to animals with noses dozens of times more sensitive than theirs. He replanted a ring of pepper seeds in a shallow trench about 150 meters out from the cave. Natural perimeter defense, 0 ammunition required. Once that barrier grew in, no breathing creature would be able to cross it. Back inside, he confirmed what for days of daily bonfires next to the portal had achieved. Charging speed sitting at 206% of baseline. Total accumulated time, 8 minutes and 33 seconds. Not enough for a productive Earth visit yet. He wanted at least 10 before making the next trip. Enough time for supplies, samples, coordination, and maybe a real meal that someone else had cooked. He looked at the twins sunbathing on warm rocks outside, faces tilted up toward three suns. Completely relaxed for the first time in weeks. No rush. The portal could keep charging. He would go home when the numbers were right. 2 more minutes of charge time needed. He stuffed the cave bonfire full of wet wood and charcoal to squeeze out every last percentage. Point, handed both girls water, and settled into the shade of a big rock to wait. Suyao sat cross-legged with the military tablet in her lap, piloting the drone over the bestiar settlement. She had turned daily surveillance into a personal hobby, fascinated by every detail down below. Adult women training dinosaurs, shaping stone tools, children chasing each other across open ground. She pointed out enthusiastically that their tails moved and twitched with their emotions. Then she called them over with a different kind of excitement in her voice. A hunting party was returning to the village. The warriors carried heavy loads of game, but hanging from vine ropes in the center of the group were at least a dozen captured ginseng creatures, each one bigger than their workers back at camp. He stared at the screen. These bestiar women grabbed ginseng by the handful like they were picking radishes at a market. What was a miraculous ancient medicine to them was apparently just a running vegetable snack to a species with their physical capabilities. While Su Yao was absorbed in her observation duties, he quietly slipped his arm around Suli's waist from behind. She flinched slightly, but did not pull away. She leaned back against his chest instead, her cheek catching the sunlight. He leaned close to her ear and asked quietly if her monthly situation had passed. She understood exactly what he was actually asking. She gave a tiny nod and whispered that it had ended the night before. He tightened his arms and told her he wanted to come find her tonight. Just to talk, he said. Just some conversation between the two of them. She whispered back that she would leave her door unlatched. There was a softness in her voice that made his pulse jump. Then Su Yao shattered the moment with a shriek. She had spotted something on the drone feed and bolted upright, yelling at him to stop being sentimental and come look at the screen immediately. Then she turned to her sister and announced with zero tact that she knew exactly what kind of thoughts Suli was having right now. Suli's face went from pleasantly pink to deep crimson in about half a second. Su Yao had the timing of a guided missile when it came to catching her sister in vulnerable moments. He sighed and walked over to see what had gotten her so worked up. Whatever she had found on the drone feed. Her expression had shifted from mischievous to genuinely alarmed. On the screen, about 50 kilometers from their cave, right at the burned edge of the scorched zone, a large group of creatures was moving fast through the landscape. Nothing like the bestiar women. These were proper monsters, over 50 of them, each standing at least 4 meters tall, making even the 3-meter bestiar women look small by comparison. Heads fully animal, green skin, outward jutting tusks, burning red eyes, thick dirty brown fur across their entire bodies, muscles packed with explosive violent power. And the females among them were just as massive, just as hairy, just as terrifying as the males. Their equipment was what truly chilled him. Crude armor made from animal parts, riding mounts over 6 meters long, covered in black bone plating, 6 legs giving them stability and speed that no terrain could slow down, 4-meter beast men riding 6-meter armored creatures and carrying weapons. The visual impact was like watching a column of heavy tanks moving through a forest. Suli pointed out their weapons, long silver-white metal rods, not crude stone tools like the bestiar women used. These looked like salvaged structural beams from the same lost advanced civilization whose artifacts they had been finding scattered across the planet. Even without proper spearheads, solid metal bars swung by 4-meter giants would be devastating. The hunting party leader was the largest of the group, a one-eyed brute that kicked a charred boulder to pieces in frustration. When it found nothing edible in the burn zone, then it dropped its massive head to the ground and started tracking, nose moving methodically along the earth, following a scent trail that overlapped exactly with the route the bestiar foraging party had taken when they came to collect fire-roasted animals from their territory days earlier. The leader confirmed the trail, threw its head back, and let out a roar that even through the drone's tiny speaker sounded absolutely terrifying. It raised its metal rod and pointed toward the bestiar village. All 50 creatures roared together and spurred their mounts into a full charge, following the scent trail like bloodhounds locked onto prey. Su Yao grabbed his arm, face wide with fear. If these things finished off the bestiar village and then followed their scent back to their cave, 3 humans and 2 vegetable workers were not going to hold the line. He sat back and laid out the situation clearly. He held up 3 fingers. Do nothing and hide. Help the beast men. Help the bestiar women. He called for a vote. Su Yao's hand went up before he finished the sentence. Option 3, no hesitation. Her reasoning was characteristically direct. The beast men were ugly, and ugly things could not possibly be the right side to help. The bestiar women raised baby, dinosaurs and dodo birds, and seemed at least slightly more civilized. Su Li voted 3 as well, with more strategic reasoning. She reminded him of an essay he had once tutored her on, about how when your neighbor falls, you become the next target. Losing the bestiar tribe to this war party would eliminate their buffer zone and make them the next meal. He was genuinely impressed by her analysis, though he could not resist noting that she seemed to remember his tutoring content perfectly now, having conveniently forgotten all of it during actual exams. He agreed with both of them and added his own simpler motivation. Helping someone during their darkest moment earns maximum loyalty. This crisis was their best possible opportunity to make contact on favorable terms. Also, and he said this out loud without apology, given the choice between allying with the bestiar women and the tusk brutes, the decision made itself. Unanimous, they were helping the bestiar women. Su Yao immediately asked how 50 kilometers away, 3 people, no direct combat options, and no way to reveal their existence safely. He told her to keep the current drone tracking the beastman column from a safe distance, and to record their war cries and sounds. He told Su Li to unpack the 3rd fully charged drone and prepare for a special modification. The plan was simple. They could not fight this battle, but they could warn the tribe, send an advance alert about the incoming attack without ever showing their faces. An anonymous gift of critical intelligence delivered from the sky. No exposure, no risk. Maximum good will earn from a people who could crush them with one hand if they became enemies. The beastmen wanted a surprise attack. He was going to ruin that surprise completely. Su Yao brought the 2nd drone low through the treetops toward the beastman camp, sweating but completely focused. On screen, the 4-meter brutes were gathered in a clearing, some feeding raw meat to their mounts, others scratching marks into the dirt with metal rods, apparently planning how to divide the bestiar women once they attacked. He signaled Su Yao to fly directly over the leader's head. She pushed the stick forward and the drone screamed over the chief at barely 30 meters altitude. The beastman chief snapped his head up, red eyes blazing. He let out a roar so loud it distorted the drone's tiny speaker into static. Perfect. Every decibel recorded. But the chief was fast. He grabbed his metal rod and hurled it skyward like a javelin. The bar tore through the air and Su Yao's fingers became a blur on the controls. The drone jerked sideways in a desperate evasive maneuver and dodged the rod by what looked like centimeters. Beautiful flying under genuine pressure. Then all 50 beastmen went berserk. A storm of rocks and poles went skyward. Su Yao wove through the barrage with incredible skill. But real life has signaled delay. A rock clipped the drone's side and the screen went black. Drone to down. He kissed her forehead and told her she did an amazing job. The mission was a complete success. They had everything they needed. He took his phone with the recorded beastman roars and strapped it firmly to the underside of Drone 3 with strips of cloth. Su Li looked at this combination of cutting-edge military surveillance technology and a consumer smartphone taped underneath and could not stop herself from commenting on how deeply absurd it looked. He told her ugly works just as well as pretty. He tested the speaker at maximum volume and the beastman war cry blasted across the rocky ground, so loud that both ginseng workers drilled themselves underground in half a second. Perfect, crystal clear, and absolutely terrifying. Drone 3 launched and headed west at full speed toward the bestiar village, 50 kilometers away, carrying a recorded threat from their enemy as its only payload. While it flew, he thought about what was happening at the receiving end. The bestiar tribe had no idea what was coming. Normal afternoon activities, cooking, training, caring for children, completely unaware that 50 heavily armed cavalry were thundering toward them right now. The tribal leader sat near the cave entrance sharpening a double-bladed stone axe. Through previous drone observations, he had gotten a good look at her. Silver hair like a waterfall down her back, white cat ears that could swivel independently, features sharp and cold, projecting both natural allure and absolute authority. She spotted the drone approaching from the east. Her ears snapped upright and rotated toward it like satellite dishes. Her expression was pure feline annoyance. Their daily surveillance flights had apparently not gone unnoticed. She had known about them. She had tolerated them, but today the drone was not sneaking in at high altitude. It was flying straight toward her settlement in broad daylight. Her tail whipped back and forth in clear agitation. The other tribe members set down their tools and turned toward the eastern sky. All conversation died. She stood, golden cat eyes narrowing to vertical slits, stone axe grip tight. She was done being patient with this uninvited visitor. What she did not know yet was that this visit was not surveillance. It was salvation. Suyao brought the drone to a hover just outside the 200-meter mark, directly in the path of those incredible ears. Then the wind carried the sound forward. The recorded beastman roar blasted from the phone speaker at maximum volume. The effect was instantaneous. The cat-tier leader's golden eyes contracted to pinpoints. Her entire body went rigid. She had recognized the voice not just as a generic beastman sound, but as a specific individual. That roar belonged to her own blood brother, the beastman chief, who had commanded 800 warriors, and considered these beast-tier women inferior beings worthy only of slavery or sale. The hatred between them ran years deep and ran personal. But the truly magical moment came when the drone descended to about 100 meters, and the tribe got a clear look at what was hanging underneath. A glowing black rectangle with moving images on its surface. A smartphone. The cat-tier leader turned her head toward the massive black monolith at her cave entrance, the sacred object her people had worshipped for years. She looked back up at the drone. Same shape, same dark surface, but this one was smaller and alive with light. In her mind, the connection was immediate and absolute. The ancient builders had sent a divine bird carrying a miniature version of their holy relic, and it was using the voice of their enemy to warn them. She dropped to her knees, both hands crossed over her chest, head bowed low, cat ears flat in reverence. Behind her, over 200 beast-tier women followed their leader without a moment of hesitation. Warriors, mothers, children, every single one hit the ground in full prostration, facing their tiny drone like it was the arrival of a creator god. All three of them stared at the screen in complete stunned silence. They had planned to deliver a warning. They had accidentally become divine messengers to an entire civilization. The phone they were now worshipping was the same one Suyao used to watch comedy shows. It cost roughly 5,000 yuan retail. He told Suyao to pull the drone up fast before anyone noticed the differences between their phone and the sacred stone tablet. She yanked it into the clouds immediately. Below, the cat-tier leader rose to her feet, wiped tears from her eyes, and hardened into something terrifying and lethal. The message was received. Her brother was coming. She chose to fight. She issued one sharp command, and the entire tribe transformed from a peaceful settlement into a war machine in seconds. And then she did something that made him lose his mind. She reached between the two prominent features on her chest and pulled out a small bracelet, silver-white metal with faint blue light flowing across its surface. She pressed something and held her hand over the open ground. A humming sound. A ripple in the air like space itself was bending. Then with a thundering crash, dozens of massive 5-meter double-bladed stone battle axes materialized out of thin air and piled onto the ground. Thousands of pounds of weaponry summoned from nothing. From a bracelet the size of a watch. He jumped to meters off the ground. He almost snatched the tablet out of Suyao's hands from sheer excitement. A spatial storage device. A functional pocket dimension worn as jewelry. The kind of technology that existed only in fantasy novels and science fiction films, was sitting on the wrist of a primitive alien catwoman living in a cave. Every miserable memory of hauling supplies through the portal flashed before his eyes. The 240 pounds strapped to his body. The firewood dragged down underground tunnels. The bags carried until his shoulders bled, and this woman just waved her hand and conjured an entire armory from a bracelet. He grabbed Suli by the shoulders and shook her, barely able to form coherent sentences. The rifles were nothing. The ginseng was nothing. Everything they had was primitive compared to that bracelet. If he could get his hands on one, the weight limitation that had been the single biggest constraint on their entire operation would simply cease to exist. Suli, dizzy from being shaken, pointed out that whatever civilization had once inhabited this planet was far more advanced than they had imagined. If even a small primitive tribe possessed spatial technology as standard equipment. On screen, the leader armed 80 of her strongest warriors with the summoned axes and divided the tribe into flanking positions. Traps were dug. spike barriers planted along approach routes. Children hauled rocks to high ground. The weakest members stayed visible near the entrance, acting as bait, pretending everything was normal. A perfectly organized ambush taking shape in minutes with proper warning and proper weapons. But his attention had already drifted from the strategy. His eyes were fixed on one thing only, that silver bracelet glowing softly on the cat-tier leader's wrist. He muttered to himself that he absolutely had to get that bracelet, not through force, through whatever it took. That was a goal he was committed to. The battle played out on their tiny screen 50 kilometers away, sitting on warm rocks in the alien sun. The beast-ear women had set the trap perfectly. The weakest members sat near the cave entrance looking completely defenseless, casually eating and grooming each other's tails. The beast-man scout that crept out to observe saw exactly what they wanted him to see. Easy prey, no guards, no weapons visible. He did not check the trees. He did not notice the covered pits or the warriors hidden in the canopy. He turned around and sprinted back to report good news. Su Yao called him an idiot. He told her it was not stupidity, but arrogance. When you believe your enemy is too weak to fight back, you stop looking for danger. That overconfidence was about to cost them everything. The ground shook. 50 beastman cavalry came thundering out of the forest on their armored mounts. Screaming war cries, metal rods raised. The instant the main group crossed the trap line, the earth collapsed. Hidden pits swallowed the front ranks whole. Riders and mounts crashing down onto sharpened stakes and stone spikes. Su Yao cheered. Then their celebration died. The beast men who fell were not dead, not even seriously hurt. One brute pulled a spike out of its own thigh, flicked away dark blood, then used its bare hands to claw up the pit wall and climb out, roaring with rage rather than pain. The traps had disrupted the formation, but killed nobody. These things were biological tanks. The cat-tier leader screamed her battle cry, and the ambush launched. Beast-ear warriors dropped from trees like an avalanche. Tame dinosaurs charged from the flanks. Close combat showed him the true meaning of physical power at a scale humans could not possess. A tiger-eared warrior swung her 5-meter battle axe at a beastman with everything she had. The creature blocked with its metal rod. Sparks exploded. The warrior was blasted backwards 5 meters, boots carving trenches in the dirt. The beastman barely swayed. It took 2 or 3 beast-ear women working together just to hold one beastman in place. And even then, they were losing ground. But something caught his attention in the chaos. The stone axes kept clashing against metal rods. Dozens of impacts per fight. The stone was not breaking, not even chipping. Meanwhile, the metal rods were being dented, bent, and gouged with every hit. Those axes were made from the same glowing mineral that composed their entire mountain. It was not just beautiful, it was harder than any metal alloy either species could manufacture. With enough sharpening, it could cut through almost anything. The battle peaked where the cat-tier leader fought the beastman chief one-on-one, her blood brother, who had enslaved and sold her kind for years, attacked with savage fury. She said nothing. She was smaller and weaker, so she did not try to match his power. She danced around his massive body, targeting joints and vulnerable spots with surgical precision, staying low, using his momentum against him. When another warrior created a momentary opening, she took it. Her legs launched her into the air. She twisted in a way that defied physics and brought her double-bladed axe crashing down on the back of his skull with everything she had. The giant crumpled, not dead, but unconscious. Too much bone and muscle for even that devastating blow to be fatal. With their leader down, the remaining beastmen lost all cohesion. The beast-tier warriors swarmed the disorganized survivors and cut them down one by one. The victory was real, but the cost was staggering. 8 beast-tier warriors lay dead on the battlefield, over 30 more seriously wounded. He stared at the screen and felt something heavy settle in his chest. Without their early warning, giving the tribe time to set the ambush, none of those women would have survived today. And somewhere in the back of his mind he knew this was only the beginning. The Beastman chief had commanded 800 warriors. Today they had helped eliminate 50. 750 were still out there, and eventually they would come looking for answers about their missing war party. The battle was over. The aftermath was brutal, and the drone feed showed a small rabbit-eared girl curled on the ground clutching a broken leg. Su Yao could barely look at the screen. He told her they were not going to just sit there. This was exactly the moment he had been waiting for. Helping now would earn them more genuine goodwill than 100 peaceful gestures ever could. He launched the fourth and final drone with a phone strapped underneath, set to loop the Chinese trauma surgery medical guide video. On continuous repeat at maximum brightness, screen lock permanently open. No medicine needed from them. When the Katir leader's spatial bracelet could produce fresh ginseng by the armful, and her warriors ate the roots like apples. Their little first aid kit was not the resource these women needed. What they lacked was knowledge, technique, the ability to save a limb that their tradition would have amputated. That was what the drone would deliver, not pills, education. The drone arrived at the village and was received exactly as before, as a divine messenger returning with sacred gifts from the ancient builders. The Katir leader held the phone like it contained the secrets of creation itself, tears streaming down her face as she looked at the moving images. The medical video showed clear hand movements demonstrating wound cleaning, bleeding control, bone setting, and basic life-saving procedures. No language required, just watch and copy. The leader understood immediately. She looked at the screen, then looked at the rabbit-eared child whose broken bone had punched through the skin. By her people's knowledge, once a wound looked like that, amputation was the only answer. She had been raising a stone knife to begin when the drone had arrived. She set the knife down and followed the video instead, step by step, exactly as the surgeon on screen demonstrated. He watched from 50 kilometers away, holding his breath, as the most powerful woman on this planet applied techniques she had learned from a looping video on a consumer smartphone, delivered by a remote-controlled plastic machine carrying a taped-on phone. The child's leg was set correctly, the wound was clean, the fracture was stabilized. The girl would keep her leg. He exhaled slowly and leaned back against the warm rock. A tribe of 200 superhuman warriors now believed the ancient builders were watching over them, sending divine birds with sacred knowledge whenever they were in danger. And those divine birds came from the direction of a certain mountain-based cave 50 kilometers east. The foundation for the most important alliance on this planet had just been laid. Not through weapons, not through force, but through a warning given in time and knowledge offered freely. He looked at the solar panels humming quietly, the battery at full charge, the automated cannon sweeping its infrared eye back and forth across the open ground, the green shoots of their crop forest bending in the alien breeze. He looked at Su Yao sitting cross-legged with the tablet, still watching the village below, occasionally narrating the activity down there to nobody in particular. He looked at Suli standing nearby in the warm light of 3 suns, watching the horizon with an expression that was somewhere between thoughtful and content, a small private smile at the corner of her mouth. One day he would stand in front of that Katir leader face to face, and on that day, the groundwork laid today would be the reason she chose ally over enemy. One day he would get that spatial bracelet through trust and mutual benefit, not through any clumsy grab. One day the portal's charging time would be long enough to bring real infrastructure through. Heavy equipment, vehicles, the kind of support that could turn a cave into a genuine settlement. But today was not those days. Today they had food growing faster than they could eat it, water flowing underground, power from the sky, a cannon at the door, a pepper barrier growing on the perimeter, to loyal vegetable workers tending the fields, and an entire civilization of warrior women 50 kilometers away who believed the gods were on their side, because of 3 humans in a cave who had decided to be useful instead of hiding. That evening they sat together on the warm rocks outside the entrance. As the 3 sons began their descent, Su Yao leaned against his arm and stole strips of dried meat from his hand without asking. Suli sat on his other side close enough that their shoulders touched, watching the golden light spread across the ash field. The terrible giant planet had not risen yet. The sky was just clean and alien and full of color. Su Yao announced with complete seriousness that she thought the rabbit-eared girl below was her favorite and that she wanted to adopt her. Suli said that was impossible given that the girl was probably 5 times stronger than all 3 of them combined. Su Yao said that was fine. She could be the little sister that protected everyone, and she herself would provide emotional support and cooking expertise. He said she barely knew how to boil water. She said she was learning, and that growth was what mattered. The argument was not resolved. It rarely was with Su Yao. Suli quietly took his hand while her sister was distracted by a ginseng worker that had emerged from the field to investigate the smell of food. She held it without saying anything, and he held it back the same way. Some things on this planet did not require words. The universe had thrown them through a glowing green portal and dropped them into a world that wanted them dead on arrival. There had been giant boars with hides like armor plating, a forest fire that burned for days, dinosaurs that laughed at their weapons, a tribe of 3-meter warriors with impossible hearing and throwing arms like biological catapults, beastmen cavalry with metal rods and armored mounts, and a one-eyed chief who sent trails across 50 kilometers of burned earth. There had been bat-filled tunnels and alien rivers and body purification that came out of every pore at once, and nights spent wondering if any of them would still be alive by morning. And yet, here they were, for weeks in, more or less, and the scorecard was looking considerably better than it had any right to be. A crystal mountain at their backs, a hot river at their feet, an underground cavern that was now as close to home as anything he had known, crops that grew faster than Earth could imagine, power from 3 suns, weapons that could punch through anything that came walking toward them on 2 legs or 4 or 6. To ginseng workers who had gone from terrified captives to enthusiastic employees, who brought him weeds as tribute, an entire nation back on Earth that had designated one man's survival as an active official military operation and was building support packages around the specific type of monsters that kept trying to eat him. A mother-in-law who had apologized and offered corporate shares and cried down a satellite phone. And to girls who, when the cave went dark and something came howling from the forest, had sat back to back with a loaded shotgun and held the line without being asked. He had not chosen any of this. The portal had chosen for him, but standing here now, watching the sun set and one still climbing, with hot jerky in his hand and a full battery humming at his back, and corn taller than his head swaying in the alien wind, he could not honestly say he wanted to be somewhere else. That probably said something about the kind of person he was. Or maybe it just said something about the particular kind of impossible situation. That turns out to be exactly where you were supposed to end up. The last sun touched the horizon, and the ash field turned deep orange and violet around them. Su Yao fell asleep mid-argument about something involving the rabbit-eared girl and vegetable soup. Cheek pressed against his arm, mouth still slightly open. Su Li looked at her sleeping sister and then looked at him, and for a long moment neither of them said anything. Then she leaned her head against his shoulder and closed her eyes. The ginseng guards had burrowed back into the field. The automated turret swept quietly in the dark. The portal glowed deep green somewhere inside the cave, accumulating minutes, patient and indifferent. Out west, 50 kilometers away in a settlement they had never visited and a people they had never spoken to, a small girl was sleeping with a properly set leg and all her limbs intact, because someone had decided that helping strangers from the sky was worth 1 drone, and 1 smartphone, and the last clear signal before the battery died. That was the kind of decision that did not always get rewarded. Sometimes it just got you killed. But on this planet, on this particular evening, it had turned out to be exactly the right move. And in 3 days or 5 days, or however long it took for the portal to hit the next threshold, he would step back through the green light and stand again on a street in some city on Earth, covered in ash and alien residue. And someone in an olive green uniform would snap to attention and ask what he needed. And he would give them a list and they would load it onto him. And he would carry it back through the portal and drop it on the cave floor. And watch Su Yao dive for the food. And Su Li tried to maintain her dignity while doing exactly the same thing. And the process would repeat, in slightly better each time. A few more minutes of portal time. A few more kilometers of land cleared. A few more allies identified or cultivated or carefully not yet approached. Progress on an alien planet looks like this. 1 day and 1 decision at a time. Not a straight line. Not a guaranteed outcome. Just the accumulation of better choices made by people who refused to stop making them. The giant planet had not risen yet. The sky stayed dark and clear and mercifully small scale above their heads. Somewhere in the forest that was slowly regrowing around the burn zone, something howled once and then went quiet. The turret hummed and rotated to degrees and settled. He closed his eyes. This was not home. This was something harder than home, and stranger than home, and more dangerous than any home he had ever known. But it was also something home had never quite managed to be. It was necessary, every hour of it, every decision, every batch of smoked meat, and every ginseng root hair, and every drone that came back in pieces. All of it necessary, all of it building toward something he could not fully see yet, but could feel the shape of. The way you feel the shape of a room before your eyes adjust to the dark. A settlement, a farm, an alliance, a root home that stayed open and got wider each time. A reason to come back. That last one mattered more than the others, probably. Su Yao murmured something in her sleep and shifted, and Suli made a small sound at his shoulder, somewhere between a sigh and contentment. He opened his eyes and looked up at the alien sky. 3 suns during the day, a terrifying planet at night, bats that died from light, plants that ran on legs, giants that heard whispers through stone from 200 meters away. A world so completely different from the one he came from that nothing in any survival manual had prepared him for a single day of it. And yet here, in the small warm circle of the 3 of them, with the portal glowing steadily deeper toward its next threshold, the math was simple. More time, more resources, more trust built with the people who lived here long before he arrived. More chances to do the thing that had kept them alive every single time so far. Make the better choice, and then make it again. Somewhere inside the cave, the portal clicked to another milestone. 1 minute added. The number on whatever invisible counter tracked these things ticking quietly upward. He did not hear it. He was already close to sleep. 2 girls breathing steadily on either side of him under the alien stars. Tomorrow the fields would need checking. The perimeter pepper barrier would have grown another cycle. The surveillance drone would need to sweep the Beastman territory to track whether the missing war party had been noticed yet. There were seeds still to plant, stone to be worked into walls, plans that needed to become structures and structures that needed to become permanents. So much to do, so much already done. And the portal, patient and green and indifferent to all of it, kept collecting minutes in the dark. He smiled once, eyes still closed, and let himself sleep. Whatever came next on this planet, it was going to find 3 humans who were considerably harder to kill than they had been the day they arrived, and considerably less alone. The first night they had pressed themselves against a cave wall and listened to the jungle roar, and wondered if they would last until morning. Now the cave had electric lights and smoke meat hanging wall to wall and a cannon at the door, pointed at anything that tried to ruin the evening. That is what 40 days of refusing to give up looks like. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just different, incrementally and undeniably from what it was before. Better walls, better weapons, better food, better chances. And to people sitting next to you who, when the cave goes dark and something comes howling from the direction of the burned forest, do not freeze and do not run. They load the shotgun and hold the line and wait for you to come home. That, more than the cannon or the drones or the armor-piercing rounds or the ginseng-upgraded muscles, was the resource that actually mattered on a planet that wanted them dead. The trust between them, built one honest decision at a time. The portal kept charging in the dark. The fields kept growing in the ash. The tribe 50 kilometers west kept sleeping with 1 fewer injury than they would have carried, without the intervention of a drone and a borrowed phone and 3 humans, who had decided that strangers in trouble were worth the last spare battery. This alien planet had thrown everything it had at them from the first moment they arrived, and they were still here, still building, still choosing to come back. That was enough.